the tone and the setting, but it all looks a bit sci-fi and a bit morally questionable. Is that a good assessment?
Certainly morally questionable. Yeah, it's about the Assembly, who are this group of engineers and scientists who have created this underground bunker. And
Here we go now, in fact.
Yes. So this is the underground bunker, and you basically you play as a couple of different characters in here, and you're trying to figure out what on earth is going on. These guys do experiments that they wouldn't be allowed to do in the real world, that may be morally questionable or actually against the law, but they think are for the benefit of mankind and will actually ultimately help people. So you are trying to figure out what's happening down there. You play as a couple of different characters, and it's a really interesting, really strong story written by this guy called Tom Joubert, who wrote FTL, The Swapper, and a few other really great games, Penumbra. So he's a really good young writer, and it's a very powerful story that runs through the game.
So this kind of, wow, that did not go well for him. This kind of sci-fi, not really sci-fi, this kind of scientific lab aesthetic. What was your inspiration for this? Like, I mean, are you big? People are going to draw conclusions, draw comparisons, sorry, to things like Half-Life, for example. Yeah. But what are your inspirations for this kind of setting?
Well, we wanted to do something mysterious, and we want to do something that wasn't big and open world, because with VR we wanted to make sure it runs at 100 frames a second and is super silky smooth. So we thought, and we also wanted to make a game that was not too fast-paced. For us, VR is all about exploration and looking at and exploring and figuring out what's going on and solving puzzles. So we felt that this kind of interior setting and an underground bunker seemed really suitable for that, where you were stuck and you had to try and escape and you had to figure out what was going on. And we could go from room to room, from place to place, and try and figure out and solve this powerful story and solve these puzzles. We've got a load of puzzles in there, physics, and we've got cameras, we've got binoculars, microscopes, lots of visual stuff that works well with VR.
So really trying to play with new ways of using VR, using Oculus.
Absolutely, yeah. We spent a lot of time messing around with VR, experimenting and prototyping, and trying things like what happens when you wear glasses, what happens when it's cold and you breathe. And we've got for example, two characters that are very different. One's a lot higher, taller than the other, and in VR you really notice the height difference. You notice the fact that you're close to the door, you're smaller when you're another character. You notice the different sounds they make.
So I see you can see your avatar. I can see here when you're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you look down,
so this is the beginning of the game. This is just a small section of it, but you're basically being pushed in on a gurney. You're being wheeled in as one of the characters called Madeline, and you're basically being pushed into this place. You're an initiate, and they give you basically an initiation test to try and check that you're good enough to join the organisation and to sort of teach you about it.
Are we here under our own? Our free will, or are we strapped to this?
You're strapped in. You're not really there by your free will
dark.
at all. So we thought this was a really nice intro to a VR game, because VR is very different. You see stuff in 3D. It's a nice, gentle intro where you can look around, you can hear what's going on, you can hear what the characters are saying, and then you get knocked out and put into a cell, and then you start to learn about picking up objects, walking around, solving puzzles, using an inventory, and doing that kind of stuff.
So that intro bit's on rails, but then after this is kind of you control it with a gamepad,
you're
and
walking
you move around as well. Okay.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of detail in there, so it's really designed so you can just explore and look and examine and kind of figure out what's going on.
Okay, now I've had a couple of opportunities to use Oculus and Morpheus once, but the only time I've used it and it's not made me slightly want to vomit was when I was in like a space plane, for example, Valkyrie. Yeah. So how have you guys gone about making sure that people don't throw up over your lovely science lab?
Well, we've done a lot of testing, and I think one thing I should say is that if you use the new GK2 or the Morpheus, they both have positional tracking on them, which helps an awful lot.
Makes a huge difference, because really you've got that depth,
much more
right?
Than you'd imagine. Because when you're sat here, you almost always sway left or right or move forward a bit. Positional tracking really compensates for that and means you see what you expect to see. And also, our game is fairly slow paced. There's no rushing, there's no running, there's no turning around 180 degrees super quickly, shooting at people. It's a nice channel game that works really well with the VR headsets as they currently are.
So there's no combat in this game then? It's all puzzle and...
No, there's no combat, there's no guns, there's puzzle based, there's lots of tension, there's some scary stuff, there's some vertigo, there's some fear, but there's no combat in it.
So is horror like a big, kind of thrilling situations, scary situations, they're a big part of this?
It's definitely not a horror game with creatures and monsters, but there are psychological horror tricks in there.
So it's kind of like, what on earth are they doing in this lab type of horror?
Very much so, yeah. And some really tough moral choices as well. So as a player, you really are, we're questioning where your lines are, what you would do and what you wouldn't do, where your sort of ethical lines are, and the story's great with regard to that. So we're really questioning what you believe and what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and that affects the story as well.
Okay, fantastic. So a few more questions for you here. So you've been producing this for both Morpheus and Oculus together. I mean, has that been do you have to design them differently for each unit, or do they just function kind of as monitor? Is it very similar
They're
process?
actually surprisingly similar. I mean, there are a few differences. Audio's a bit different on the Morpheus at the moment. The control system's actually one of the biggest challenges. At the moment, you know, on the Morpheus, you've got the PlayStation, the DualShock 4 for the PlayStation 4, and that works really well. You can rotate it, you can move it around. It's great for tracking. On Oculus, there isn't an obvious default control solution at the moment, so we kind of have to support mouse and keyboard, which is a real challenge in VR. You can imagine trying to hit traditional keys in VR with a headset on is impossible, so you kind of have to stick to the cursor keys and the space bar and using the mouse. We support controllers as well, and we're looking at the other VR control systems as well, but that's probably the biggest difference between the two. Technically, they're very similar, and the actual game runs very, very similarly on both of them, actually.
Ooh. So you mentioned there's 2 characters that you play when you play the assembly. So who are they? Who are these characters? How much do you say?
Madeline Stone is this female scientist who's kind of being dragged into here against her will. She's going through an initiation test. They're basically finding out about her, whether she'd be right to join this organization, and also telling her about them. And then there's somebody called Joel, who is is basically been working for the assembly for quite a while, and he's starting to question their morality. He's trying to question whether they're the organisation he signed up with, and there's a few slightly scary things he's noticing that he's not quite confident about, and I won't say any more, but that's where the story starts. Okay.
So this kind of really kind of gruesome, scare. Well, I mean it's gruesome, but like tense-filled, morally ambiguous science story. What was your inspiration? I mean, are there films that have led you towards this, or are the games you played, or are you just a fan of science in general? I mean, I'm trying to figure out where this has come from.
Yeah, I think possibly at the time we were designing it, there was this whole NSA hacking, you know, engineers stuff, and there's a little bit of that in the story, and you know, there's Google and all the new rise of the new tech companies, and we felt like that'd be a great storyline. We wanted to kind of do almost like a cult, but this is a modern cult. This isn't a cult from the 16th century dressed in robes that have been going around for hundreds of years. This is a modern scientific cult, and I think that's a really interesting contrast.
Okay. Just need your mic a little bit closer, I think. Anyway, so that all sounds really great. This is not your first experience of developing for VR, though, is it? You guys have done something before, is that right?
Well, we released a demo called Skydiving, which was literally something we created in a 48-hour game hack.
Oh, right, it was a game hack thing.
Yeah, it was really good fun, and we created it, spent a week touching it up, put it out there, got a great reaction, and based on that, we decided VR was a thing for our studio. We've pivoted to do VR. We've got a few other games and experiences that we're going to announce later this year, but the Assembly is our first game we're showing off and the biggest, and we're really proud of it.
Is it strange, like, making a game for a platform that, you know, is still in development and could change, you know, even while you're trying to build your game?
Yeah, it's a fascinating and challenging thing because the hardware is changing with the software, and we're getting new builds, new versions of the hardware, new things are going in, new features, and we're having to go with that. But that's exciting as well. That's really exciting, and being part of something like VR, which is has so much potential and is in its infancy, and it's kind of like the early days of mobile phones with the big brick telephones. You know, I think that's kind of how VR is now, and wait till you see where VR is going to go over the next few years. It's going to be so exciting.
So so that's an interesting question, actually. Like, how far do you think it's going to go? How E3 in 5 years' time? How different do you think? Is there going to be a lot more VR? Do you think?
Yeah, I think there will be a lot more VR, and there'll be VR, and it won't just be traditional games. You won't just see games of the kind that you've played on PlayStation or Xbox or PC before. You'll see new kinds of experiences and games that are a little bit different. And I think you'll see the headsets evolving a lot as well. You'll see them coming a lot smaller, and ultimately, you know, hopefully the size of a pair of sunglasses. And yeah, I think you'll see VR just stretching and growing as we're finding our feet. We're learning about this technology. We're learning what works and what doesn't work, and I think that's just gonna get better and better as we move forward.
So